Evelyn Matthews stood behind the polished counter of her five-star restaurant, the clinking of silverware and the murmur of patrons creating a familiar backdrop to her thoughts. The night was bustling, her staff executing their roles flawlessly. But something was different tonight. Tonight, she was about to confront everything that had been hidden beneath the surface for too long. Evelyn, a voice interrupted her musings. It was Marco, her longtime friend and executive chef. He gave her a subtle nod, signaling her to take a seat in the back office. The moment was coming. Her heart raced, not from nerves, but from a sense of inevitable reckoning. She had been leading a double life for months, maybe even years. On one hand, she was the owner of Evelyn's, a restaurant that had earned Michelin stars, accolades, and a reputation as one of Boston's finest establishments. On the other hand, she was just another waitress, a waitress in her own restaurant. She had kept this secret from everyone, especially from Derek, her fiancé. Derek, with his polished suits, Ivy League education, and sharp ambition, had never once questioned her waitressing job. He had no idea that she was the woman behind the restaurant. He thought she was just another part-time worker serving tables, a quaint little job to pass the time while he dominated the world of commercial real estate law. But that was the lie she allowed him to believe. The first time Evelyn had met Derek, she hadn't meant to deceive him, but when she saw the arrogance in his eyes, the way he dismissed others as beneath him, she knew the truth would never fit into his world. So she played the part. The humble, hard-working waitress, while concealing the reality of her success. It wasn't that she was ashamed of who she had become. No, Evelyn was proud of the woman who had built an empire from a small, failing diner left to her by her grandmother. But Derek wouldn't see it that way. He wouldn't respect her. He would never respect someone in her position, someone who served others for a living. So she served him, along with the rest of the high society that frequented her restaurant, pretending to be one of them, while secretly holding the keys to their entire world. When Derek began to come in regularly for dinner, asking for her section specifically, Evelyn had smiled to herself. He liked her, but he had no idea who she really was. She was just a waitress to him. They had their quiet moments, their shared meals, and their casual conversations. They would walk along the Charles River, sip wine at other restaurants, and share dreams of the future. But Evelyn knew the truth. The future Derek envisioned wasn't one that included her as an equal. It included someone who shared his ambition, someone who could be molded into the perfect partner for his career, someone who would be a reflection of his success. It wasn't long before Evelyn began to notice the cracks in their relationship. She had always believed that if she kept her professional life hidden long enough, Derek would eventually see her for who she truly was. But each passing day, she saw more evidence that Derek's respect for her was conditional. The first sign came when he commented on one of her newer servers at the restaurant. "Isn't management screening these people at all?" Derek had said, dismissing the young woman's minor mistake as if it were unforgivable. The server, a single mother, working her way through nursing school, had stumbled under the pressure. But to Derek, she was just another cog in the machine, easily replaced. Evelyn had watched her face fall as she tried to apologize, and for the first time in their relationship, she found herself questioning everything. That was when she knew Derek's respect wasn't for her. It was for the version of herself that he imagined, the version he thought he knew. And that version of her had nothing to do with the woman who owned the restaurant, who had worked tirelessly to make Evelyn's what it was. The woman who had transformed her grandmother's failing diner into a Michelin-starred institution. The woman who didn't just serve tables, but ran a business. Derek's increasing visits to Evelyn's, accompanied by clients and colleagues, further highlighted the disparity between them. He continued to view her as the waitress, a role she had chosen for him to see. Meanwhile, Evelyn watched him climb the corporate ladder, secure in his position, while she remained an unseen force behind the scenes. But the day Derek took it too far was when he suggested she stop working altogether. When he implied that her role at the restaurant, her life's work, wasn't good enough. "You work too hard for too little," he had said one evening. "After a long shift, you should be using those talents for something better, something with real advancement." The words stung more than they should have, especially coming from the man she was supposed to spend her life with. How had they gotten here? How had this ambitious, driven woman, the one who had built an empire from scratch, become the object of someone's pity? But Evelyn didn't answer him. She didn't explain that she had built an empire. She didn't tell him that she had bought a second location across town for expansion. She didn't reveal that the reason she was so committed to the restaurant, so present every Tuesday night, was because it was her heart and soul.
No.
She said nothing. She just let the words hang in the air. The unspoken truth between them growing heavier with every day. Now, as she stood before him, Derek, her fiancé, the man she had sacrificed so much for, Evelyn could feel the weight of the deception lifting off her shoulders. Tonight, everything would change. Tonight, Derek would learn the truth. The evening air was cool as Evelyn stepped into the restaurant's back office, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Her heart was racing, not from fear, but from the realization that tonight, everything would change. Her secret was no longer hers to keep. The mask she had worn so carefully for Derek was finally going to come off. The restaurant was bustling, as usual, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, she was going to reveal her true self. And nothing would be the same after. She looked at Marco, her executive chef, who had been with her since the early days of Evelyn's. He knew the truth. He knew the sacrifices she had made, the countless sleepless nights spent building the restaurant, and he knew that the man Evelyn had been dating had no idea of her ownership of this place. Evelyn had kept the secret from Derek for so long, not out of shame, but out of the need to protect herself from the inevitable judgment. Derek was everything Evelyn's world was not. He was polished, with his high-end suits, his Ivy League education, and his successful career. He viewed the restaurant industry as something that lacked prestige. To him, she was just a waitress, a temporary role. But what he didn't know was that she wasn't just a waitress. She was the woman who had built this empire from the ground up. She hadn't lied to him, not really. She just let him assume, let him believe she was just a server who loved her job. But tonight, that illusion would shatter. As Evelyn walked back onto the floor, her staff gave her a knowing look. They knew what was coming, and for the first time, Evelyn felt the weight of their silent support. Marco caught her eye and gave her a small nod. It was a quiet acknowledgement that the moment had arrived. Dinner service went smoothly as usual, but Evelyn's mind was elsewhere. She knew that Derek, along with his important clients, would be arriving soon. It was his weekly visit, something he'd made a habit of. And as much as Evelyn had come to dread those nights when he would sit at the coveted corner booth, she knew tonight would be different. Tonight, she would serve him, but she wouldn't be just a waitress. As the evening wore on, she could feel the tension building. She kept busy, checking in on tables, making sure the service was flawless. But her mind kept returning to Derek. Would he be surprised? Would he be angry? Or worse, would he be disappointed in her? When Derek and his clients finally walked through the door, Evelyn felt a wave of calm settle over her. She stood at the entrance of the dining room, watching him approach. He looked every bit the part, expansive suit, confident stride, and a smile that had always made her weak in the knees. But tonight, she wasn't going to be swayed by his charm. "Good evening, Mr. Shepherd," she said, her voice professional, yet carrying an undercurrent of something more. Derek looked up, his eyes locking with hers. A moment of recognition passed between them, but he quickly masked it with a casual smile. "Ah, Evelyn, it's good to see you," he said, as if it was just another night. "Table for four, as usual." Evelyn nodded, stepping aside as Marco led them to the table. She followed them, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. But she kept her composure. This wasn't about Derek anymore. This was about her, about who she was, about what she had accomplished. As the evening unfolded, Derek tried to keep things light, chatting with his clients, ordering wine, making small talk. Evelyn worked her magic, walking between tables with practiced ease, delivering courses and ensuring everything was perfect. The staff moved like a well-oiled machine, and Evelyn was the conductor. She hadn't worked this hard to become just a waitress. She had worked hard to create a legacy that was about to be revealed. The moment finally came when she approached their table. Derek was in the middle of discussing some business deal with his clients. As usual, Evelyn took a deep breath and walked up to the table, her gaze briefly catching Marco's, who gave her an encouraging nod from the kitchen. She could do this. "Good evening, gentlemen," Evelyn said, her voice smooth and confident. "I'll be serving your table tonight. I trust everything is to your liking so far." Derek looked up, his usual flirtatious smile faltering for just a moment. The sudden shift in his demeanor didn't go unnoticed by the investors, who were now eyeing her with interest. "I didn't realize you were working tonight," Derek said, his tone slightly too casual. "I'm always here when I'm needed," Evelyn replied, her eyes steady as she placed the wine list in front of them. She deliberately ignored Derek's uneasy gaze. "May I recommend a wine pairing with your dinner tonight?" As she spoke, Derek's discomfort grew visibly. He shifted in his seat, trying to mask his growing unease. But Evelyn wasn't finished yet. "Everything is prepared to perfection tonight," she continued, her voice calm. "Our chef has specially crafted the menu. I believe you'll enjoy it." The senior investor smiled, nodding approvingly. "I must say, the food here is exceptional." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Derek. He looked like he was about to say something, but then the words seemed to catch in his throat. He wanted to speak, but he didn't know what to say. Not anymore. "Indeed, Mr. Shepherd," she said coolly. "I take pride in what we do here." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "After all, it is my restaurant." The air in the room seemed to freeze for a moment. Derek's face drained of color as the words settled in. The investors looked between them, their eyes now sharp with curiosity. "I beg your pardon," Derek stammered, his earlier confidence faltering. Evelyn smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was a smile of quiet triumph. "I'm Evelyn Matthews," she said, her voice firm, "owner and founder of Evelyn's, the restaurant you've been dining at for months, the restaurant that you thought I worked in. Just another waitress in. I'm the one who built this place from the ground up. I'm the one who earned every star, every award, and every bit of respect this place commands." Derek sat back, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "I built this place, Derek," Evelyn continued, her gaze unwavering, "and I don't need anyone to rescue me, least of all you." The silence in the room was deafening. Derek's ego, which had once been so carefully nurtured by his own success, crumbled in the face of Evelyn's truth. He had no response, nothing he could say to fix this moment. The illusion was shattered. Evelyn's heart raced, but not from fear, from the sheer exhilaration of reclaiming her power. She had spent years hiding in plain sight, pretending to be something she wasn't. But now she stood before Derek, fully herself, fully powerful. With a calm smile, she reached into her pocket, pulling out the engagement ring he had given her months ago. She placed it on the table in front of him, the diamond catching the light. "This belongs with you," Evelyn said softly, "because I no longer need it. I no longer need you." The silence that followed Evelyn's revelation felt like an eternity. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire restaurant had stopped breathing, frozen in time. Derek's face, once full of self-assuredness, was now pale, his lips trembling as he tried to grasp the gravity of what had just been revealed. He sat there, staring at Evelyn, unable to form the words that his ego so desperately tried to protect. Evelyn stood tall, her posture regal and unwavering. There was no shame in her, no guilt or fear, only a profound sense of clarity, a sense of liberation that she hadn't realized she'd been seeking until this very moment. As the realization hit Derek, the investors exchanged knowing glances, their eyes shifting between the two. They had seen it too, the shift in power, the dramatic contrast between the man who had once dominated the conversation and the woman who had quietly built everything he had taken for granted. Evelyn had done this for herself. She wasn't just revealing her success, she was reclaiming her identity, her worth, and her voice. The woman who had been overlooked, dismissed as just a waitress, was now standing in front of him as the true owner of it all. She wasn't simply a part of his world. She had built her own. "Do you have any questions, Mr. Shepherd?" Evelyn's voice was cool, her tone controlled. She knew Derek would try to salvage whatever dignity he had left, but she wasn't interested in his apologies or his excuses. Derek blinked, struggling to comprehend what was happening. I didn't know." His words faltered, and his usual arrogance crumbled, replaced by desperation. Evelyn didn't give him the satisfaction of further words. She simply turned to the investors, who were now looking at Derek with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. It was clear they were watching a man who had overplayed his hand and now had no idea how to navigate the consequences of his assumptions. "Gentlemen," Evelyn said, addressing the investors directly, "I hope you enjoyed the meal. If you'd like to discuss any further matters, I'm available." She paused, then added, "But as for Mr. Shepard," she looked down at the engagement ring that still lay on the table between them. "I think his time here has come to an end." With that, she turned to walk away, her back straight and her heart pounding in her chest. Not with anxiety, but with the thrill of reclaiming everything that had been taken from her. She heard Derek's voice behind her as she moved toward the kitchen. "Evelyn, wait. We need to talk." But she didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. As she stepped into the kitchen, Marco was there, his face betraying no emotion, but his eyes filled with silent pride. "It's done," Evelyn whispered, her voice steady. "You sure about this?" Marco asked, his concern evident but tempered by years of friendship and loyalty. "I've never been more sure," she replied. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long was finally lifting. She felt lighter than she had in years. Back in the dining room, Derek sat in stunned silence, his clients watching him as he fumbled with the ring in front of him. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to take control in the way she had. The woman he had seen as nothing more than a waitress had just taken the reins, and now he was the one left scrambling for answers. Evelyn's steps were purposeful as she moved to the staff room, where Vanessa, James, and the others were gathered. There was no fanfare, no dramatic exit. The decision had been made, and now it was time to move forward. "I've left him a letter," Evelyn said, her voice calm but firm. "A letter explaining why he'll no longer be welcome here. No room for misunderstanding, no excuses." Vanessa nodded, a slow smile creeping across her face. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You stood your ground." Evelyn smiled, the weight of the moment settling into her bones. "I had to," she replied. "It wasn't about him. It was about me." Later that evening, as the dinner rush continued and the usual hustle of the restaurant carried on, Evelyn sat in her office, reviewing the financial reports. Her world had just shifted, but for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't pretending. She was Evelyn Matthews, the woman who had built this restaurant and fought for every inch of her success. And now, she was stepping into her future, not as someone's fiancé, not as a shadow of someone else's dream, but as the person she had always been meant to be. Derek's frantic calls and messages came later that night, each one more desperate than the last. He begged for forgiveness, pleaded for a second chance. But Evelyn didn't pick up the phone. She didn't need to hear his empty promises anymore. The next morning, Evelyn received an unexpected call. It was from one of the investors who had dined with Derek the night before. He was impressed with how she handled the situation and wanted to discuss potential investment opportunities in her second location. It was a clear sign that her integrity and professionalism had left a lasting impression. As the days passed, Evelyn's life began to unfold in ways she had never imagined. The phone calls kept coming, business partners, new opportunities, and media requests. Her restaurant was no longer just a hidden gem. It was a recognized force in the culinary world. She had earned the respect she deserved. And now, no one could take that from her. But the real victory wasn't in the accolades, the press, or the expansion plans. The real victory was in the knowledge that she had taken control of her life. She had stood up for herself, not in anger, but in the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing to prove anymore. As she looked out over the city from the window of her office, Evelyn smiled. Her empire was growing, and so was she. The woman who had been dismissed as just a waitress was now a force to be reckoned with, and she was ready to keep building her future on her terms.